David Brooks, who is a conservative writer for the New York Times, happens to be, in so many instances, one of my favorite conservative writers. I can't help myself. There's certain things that Brooks has written over the years that I've been reading him that I fundamentally agree with in principle. I may not agree in the practical aspects of what he's writing about, but I certainly agree with a lot of what he says in principle. His column today, I got to share it with you. He writes, in a recent Monmouth University survey, 77% of Trump backers said Joe Biden had won the presidential election because of fraud. Many of these same people think climate change is not real. Many of these same people believe they don't need to listen to scientific experts on how to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Now, let me pause. He's titled this column, The Rotting of the Republican Mind, subtitled, When One Party Becomes Detached from Reality. And David Brooks is a conservative Republican. I don't know if he's a Republican. He's a conservative. Yeah, he's a Republican. He goes on, we live in a country in epistemological crisis in which most of the Republican Party has become detached from reality. Moreover, this is not just an American problem. All around the world, rising right-wing populist parties are floating on oceans of misinformation and falsehood. What is going on? Many people point to the internet, the way it funnels people into information silos, the way it abets the spread of misinformation. I, he writes, mostly reject this view. Why would the internet have corrupted Republicans so much more than Democrats? The global right more than the global left? My analysis, he writes, begins with a remarkable essay that Jonathan Rauch wrote for National Affairs in 2018 called, quote, The Constitution of Knowledge, end quote. Rauch pointed out that every society has an epistemic regime, a marketplace of ideas where people collectively hammer out what's real. In democratic, non-theocratic societies, this regime is a decentralized ecosystem of academics, clergy members, teachers, journalists, and others who disagree about a whole lot, but agree on a shared system of rules for weighing evidence and building knowledge. This ecosystem, Rauch wrote, operates as a funnel. It allows a wide volume of ideas to get floated, but only a narrow group of ideas survive collective scrutiny. Rauch said, quote, we let alt-truth talk, but we don't let it write textbooks, review or receive tenure, bypass peer review, set the research agenda, dominate the front pages, give expert testimony, or dictate the flow of public dollars. End quote, Mr. Rauch. Over the past decades, this information age has created a lot more people who make their living working with ideas, who are professional members of the epistemic, however you pronounce it, process. The information economy has increasingly rewarded them with money and status. It has increasingly concentrated them in ever more prosperous metro areas. While these cities have been prospering, places where fewer people have college degrees have been spiraling down. Flatter incomes, decimated families, dissolved communities. In 1972, people without college degrees were nearly as happy as those with college degrees. Now those without a degree are far more unhappy about their lives. People need a secure order to feel safe. Deprived of that, people legitimately feel cynicism and distrust, alienation, and enemy. This precarity has created, in nation after nation, intense populist backlashes against the highly educated folks who have migrated to the cities and accrued significant economic, cultural, and political power. Will Dickinson of the Niskanen Center calls this, quote, the density divide. It is a bitter cultural and political Cold War. In the fervor of this enmity, millions of people have come to detest those who populate the epistemic regime, who are so distant, who appear to have it so easy, who have such different values, who can be so condescending. Millions not only distrust everything the so-called fake news people say, but also the so-called rules they use to say them. People in this precarious state are going to demand stories that will both explain their distrust back to them and also enclose them within a safe community of like believers. The evangelists of distrust, from Donald Trump to Alex Jones to the followers of QAnon, rose up to give them those stories and provide that community. Paradoxically, conspiracy theories have become the most effective community bonding mechanisms of the 21st century. For those awash in anxiety and alienation who feel that everything is spinning out of control, conspiracy theories are extremely effective emotional tools. For those in low-status groups, they provide a sense of superiority. To wit, I possess important information most people do not have. And for those who feel powerless, conspiracy theories provide agency. I have the power to reject experts and expose hidden cabals. As Cass Sunstein of Harvard points out, they provide liberation. If I imagine my foes are completely malevolent, then I can use any tactic I want. Under Trump, the Republican identity is defined not by a set of policy beliefs, but by a paranoid mindset. He and his media allies simply ignore the rules of the epistemic regime and have set up a rival trolling regime. The internet is an ideal medium for untested information to get around traditional gatekeepers, but it is an acceleration of the paranoia, not its source. It's an accelerant of the paranoia, not the source of the paranoia. Distrust and precarity caused by economic, cultural, and specific threat are the source. What to do? You can't argue people out of paranoia. If you try to point out factual errors, you only entrench false belief. The only solution is to reduce the distrust and anxiety that is the seedbed of this thinking. And that can only be done first by contact, reducing the social chasm between the members of the epistemic regime and those who feel so alienated from it. And second, it can be done by policy, by making life more secure for those without a college degree. Rebuilding trust is, obviously, the work of a generation. Well, that was an exercise in tongue-twisting madness for your humble and obedient servant here. David Brooks, writing in today's New York Times about the rotting of the Republican mind, something that has been one of the themes of this program for how many years? How many decades? I guess it's epistemic. I know it's epistemological. See, that's one of the things I like about Brooks. Back in the day, when I first started reading him, I would have to have a dictionary at hand to understand some of the terms or the words that he was using. But I like what he quotes in this piece that he wrote today, Jonathan Rauch, a piece written back in 2018 called, quote, "The Constitution of Knowledge," unquote. And in it, Rauch writes, and Brooks quotes, "We let alternative truth talk, but we don't let it write textbooks or receive tenure or bypass peer review or set the research agenda or dominate the front pages or give expert testimony or dictate the flow of public dollars." And that's the way it should be. You know, this is where the argument, well, if you don't let me spew my bullshit, you're inhibiting my freedom of speech, my First Amendment guarantee. No, go ahead. Spew your bullshit. That's fine. Say anything you want. But when you insist that if I don't acknowledge your bullshit as anything other than bullshit, I'm infringing on your First Amendment right. Well, at that point, I suggest you can go fuck yourself. Excuse me. You can go pound sand in your ears. I don't want, say whatever you want. But when you pass it off as truth, do that too if you want to. But when you insist that my disbelief in your bullshit is somehow infringing on your right to speak, that's when I say no. Go back to the hovel you came from, get back in the woodwork, go hang out with your cucumber friends, just go away. And this is where, of course, and this is a point I think David Brooks makes, he doesn't dwell on it, but he makes a point, and it's been made by other people, this is where the internet plays such a key role in the spread of garbage and bullshit and lies and untruth and misinformation and disinformation and propaganda and fascism. There are no gatekeepers anymore. There are no filters through which what is presented as truth have to pass. They don't exist anymore. Well, to the degree necessary to weed out the garbage before it settles into the minds of people and becomes fact. You know, the horrible part of all this to me, one of the horrible parts of it, is the fact that all of this was put together during the Hitler era. And it was, he made no secret of it. When you lie, tell a big lie and tell it repeatedly. Say it over and over and over again until the Volk begin to believe it. Once the people believe it, it becomes fact. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.